As you know, if you've been watching my husband and I for any length of time, we talk a lot about how mood affects more than just your weight, your fitness, your cardiac health, your longevity. In fact, I've often said that weight loss is the stunning side effect of vibrant health. We don't really like the word diet because it first three letters are die, right? So, but your diet really affects your brain, like a lot. And you hear us talk about that, but I have a really special guest for you today. So I want to talk to Dr. Uma Naidoo and have her talk to you. She wrote a book called This Is Your Brain on Food. And we just recently did a podcast with her, and I thought, oh, this would be so great to share with my community. It's an amazing book. She's an amazing person. She is board certified and Harvard-trained psychiatrist, professional chef from Cambridge School of Culinary Arts, Cornell University nutrition specialist, renowned speaker, teacher, writer, hospital nutritional director. And so her book came out August 4th. Highly recommend it. It's just very much it's cutting edge research to explain how food contributes to your mental health. And it's just totally in alignment with what we do. So welcome, Dr. Naidoo.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It's lovely to be here. It's always great to talk to you.
Oh, you too. And your podcast was we had so much fun. And so I love to be able to share you with our social, people as well. So, so tell me, we talk a lot in our clinics about the gut-brain connection, but why don't you make that simple for people watching? Why the gut-brain connection? Like, why is it so important, not only for mental health, but why is food so important in that connection?
Absolutely. So the gut-brain axis actually physically, anatomically, biochemically connects the gut to the brain and the brain to the gut through the vagus nerve. And through the vagus nerve, what I like to call it is an informational bidirectional superhighway. So it's communicating all the time between these two organs. But here's the other thing, that serotonin, many people know, is our happiness hormone, but more than 90% of our serotonin receptors are in the gut. So if you put just those on in a very superficial way, without diving deep into too much of the science, all I'm saying is that if you think about that, what you eat and what you consume in any given day must start to impact how you are feeling emotionally. Maybe not in that moment, although we can come to some of that later. And the other thing about the gut bacteria is that studies have shown they can start to change in 24 hours. Again, you may not feel it immediately, but it starts. So every good morsel of food you put in is going to work towards your better health in terms of the good bacteria. And everything kind of not so good and unhealthy is going to start to change immediately as well. So I think that when you put those things together, we realize that what we eat gets digested there, but it also undergoes several different reactions. And it therefore becomes extremely important because it can set up inflammation in the gut. It can then spread to other parts of the body, but most importantly, it can also affect our brain and our anxiety, our depression levels as well.
I love that. So we often say, I actually have been saying this since I first did my research for Omni Diet, everything you put on the end of your fork matters. It's either medicine or it's poison. And I love how what you're doing is just very brain directed. I mean, it's just fantastic. Do you think that, as a nurse, I know I've often thought about why do we put alcohol on people's skin, right? It's to kill bacteria. So like, if you drink too much alcohol, I know that's oversimplified, but if you're drinking a lot of alcohol, probably not really good for the gut, right? If you're doing certain things that hurt your gut, what I'm hearing you say is that it damages, when you damage the gut, you are actually hurting your ability to make serotonin or the amount that you're producing.
Exactly. And how it gets to the brain, or how everything related to several neurotransmitters transmitters get impacted. So you're absolutely right. Inflammation can get set up. People can experience a leaky gut. They can have from skin rashes to many other physical symptoms. But my focus is really the fact that, as I say, we know how to eat for hypertension. Our doctors know how to tell us about cholesterol, but we don't really talk about how can you eat for better mental health. And that's where the gut becomes so important. So the inflammation gets set up, the impact of where and how and what is produced to help serotonin along gets impacted. And I think, when we ask people to do some just simple things, just some healthy eating habits like fruits, vegetables, that type of stuff feeds the fiber, brings back fiber to the gut. And that's the reason that doctors harp on that. Until I sort of went into it and studied it more on my own, I really often would make recommendations without that deeper understanding. And I feel like when you can connect the dots for people, they feel like they're doing something good for their body and their brain.
Right. No, I totally agree with you. One thing I wanted to ask you is, do you think that there's one specific diet that sort of helps everyone or hurts everyone? Or do you believe that it's a little bit different for, like, each person is individual?
Exactly. I actually feel everyone is somewhat individual. I think there's some basic, what I like to call cornerstones or pillars of what I try to work with people on. And then there are very specific really food and nutrients that they need to consume more of. And in part, that is because it's gotten a little bit more personalized, because our gut is somewhat unique to each person. And one person's response to a certain food may not be the same as another. Someone may actually find discomfort from eating legumes or beans, which, bring back fiber and a great plant-based protein, but someone may have a problem with it. So we have to tweak it as it goes along. Also, as a psychiatrist, I think that I have to, as I say to people, whether someone walks in my office with a carnivore diet or says to me, that I am vegan, I've got to be able to help them. They're coming in for help around mental health. I've got to figure out where to meet them where they're at, and say, well, here's what we can work with. So I too don't like the word diet. That's why in the book I call it Mediterranean eating pattern. But I also feel like my patients feel, if I have to go on a diet, I'm going to have to give something up. It's psychologically, it doesn't feel good. You know, so I prefer to just give them an eating pattern, but personalize it to what their needs might be, and what foods they like. Because I find that if you give people some recipes with foods they enjoy, they don't feel deprived, and then they want to start to follow that healthy habit. Yeah,
vibrant health should not feel like deprivation.
Exactly.
And it's interesting. One of the reasons I asked, we know, if you are working with the brain and with people and coaching them with nutrition, it's complicated. Diets are complicated because you've got personal belief systems, right? Like many people just don't want to eat meat, and that's fine. And you can't judge people for like their personal beliefs. You just want to help them be healthy. And at the same time, like with us, and with us, neurotransmitters, like there are just people, like I have a more sleepy brain. I do amazingly well on sort of a modified paleo keto type of diet. So high fat, high protein, lots of greens, but really low carb other than that. And I feel amazing because it sort of stimulates.
Fascinating.
Yeah. My daughter, not so much. She has a really overactive brain. She's a super busy brain. She starts to feel very unhappy and sort of spin on thoughts if she's not eating some carbohydrates. So healthy carbs, but some carbohydrates.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point. You've just described it right there. It's absolute. And you and your daughter, you're genetically related, but still with that, there can still be differences. And I think that's a beautiful example. In fact, I'm going to use it, Tana, to explain it better to my patients, because sometimes they get a little bored with every doctor tells me to eat my beans and greens. Well, there's more science to it now. We know a little bit more, and there's even more burgeoning, factors around the bacteria and stuff, which is actually super cool. So
it's so interesting. No, I love that. And I love that you are really helping people with mood with your book. So we often, like our clinics, we see that the number one, like the best testimonials we have are from people who radically change their diet more than any other intervention we can do. There are people who need medicine, but that just is a huge intervention. And so for you to be really focusing in on brain health and how, I like what you said, there are pillars. You have certain food rules, if you will, for lack of a better word, that are general. They're general. We know that eating a lot of sugar is bad for the brain. That's a general, right?
Exactly.
So tell us some of the general rules that you've found.
So let's start with the things to avoid. So, you've seen my book, Tana, and so each chapter we try to look at foods to embrace and foods to avoid and try to give people more than one option. So usually when I talk about when I speak with wonderful people like yourself, is I try to hit some high points. You're absolutely right. Sugar, we know that's not good for us. You all talk about it all the time. I so appreciate that message because it actually impacts the brain. People often think about sugar as, diabetes, and, there's a family history of diabetes in my family. It's much more than that in relation to the brain. Then there's things like trans fats, which in fact have been shown in studies to be related to increased aggression and anger. So it's not just that it's bad for your cholesterol or that type of stuff. There's now behavioral correlations being shown. So there's an additional reason. And then there's, the unprocessed, the processed bad vegetable oils. And this is a great example from the pandemic. I found that a certain number of my patients were noticing that things were hard, and yes, there's a lot of stress going on, but they were eating more meals at home. And these are individuals who travel a lot for work. And they actually found themselves feeling better even there were other things that were not. And when we really pinned it down, it was eating more healthy meals at home and not being exposed to the processed vegetable oils that are likely in a lot of, fast foods and restaurants. And then, all of the processing that goes into things like fast foods are the things that are bad for our brain. So those are the things to push away and really do it consistently, because it not only affects your brain health. Preservatives like nitrates that are found in processed meats actually have been shown to drive depression. So it's a longer list of things to avoid. And then the pillars of the things to do include the fiber-rich foods, include foods rich in pre and probiotics. Those are some pillars. And then, the omega-3s, I feel they hit on so many high notes across the different disorders, and people are aware of this. So I rather talk to them about it being one of the pillars. Include omega-3 fatty acid-rich foods, because that's going to help you out. So and the whole thing is make it simple. Make it simple that people can carry it on their phone or take a photograph of the list from the book and do that when you go shopping.
So you've got that foods to choose, foods to lose, which will really help people figure out.
Exactly.
That's people's gripe. Even still, I've been doing this for, dear Lord, 12 years or 14 years. And still people are confused by what to eat. There's so many of us out there, but food's complicated. And it changes as we learn the research, right?
It changes, absolutely. It changes as we learn the research. And sometimes messages that people get are confusing. For example, there was an Annals of Internal Medicine last fall that talked about red meat is back. It didn't frame it like that, but my patients were coming in and saying, well, I'm going to get pepperoni in my pizza. I'm going to get steak every day. And what you're telling me is wrong. So part of it is interpreting what's out there, helping them understand. Really, I really focus on trying to make it simple for people, but give them good, solid rules they can follow, plus the little tweaks that you'll find in each chapter. The foods that you didn't know you can add to your diet that could help your mood or your anxiety. So those are, that's how I like to unpack it for people.
No, I like that a lot. And one thing that I've learned is when you are looking at studies, look at who's sponsoring them. So
thank you. Thank you for
so when you start hearing, 2 glasses, 2 drinks a day or 2 glasses of wine a day is a health food, but it's sponsored by Mondavi, you need to pay attention, right? So we need to be knowing who's sponsoring these, because sometimes, right, you can skew the way that the study looks.
You can absolutely skew that. Plus, when you this, Hannah, from when you write a research article, you have to disclose, any sort of conflict of interest in that kind of stuff. Yet, if people are producing scientific work, they will get published. But it's for us to unpack that for the public, right? Because people look at that in the news, or they see a headline and they think, well, that has to be right. And it's from respectable journals. So it's really for us to help people understand that. And so thank you for saying that, because there are many flawed studies because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So sugar, we've been talking about sugar. Sugar but it's also, people have a sweet tooth. We just can't get away from it. Which of the artificial sweeteners, because even stevia is technically processed, which of the sweeteners are your favorites?
So the ones that I say to people, if they have that sweet tooth and they're struggling, that they should, stick with something like stevia, or they can also try erythritol, because it's harder. But I also talk to them. So if you must have something in your in your tea or your coffee, then go with one of those. But the other thing about it is just to understand why. that, stevia is natural, it's non-caloric, it's doesn't impact insulin. And with erythritol, again, it's a non-insulinogenic sugar, and it's a sugar alcohol. So it actually gets absorbed in the small intestine, and it is not fermented by gut bacteria. So, there are ways in which it could be a healthier choice for you, but at the same time, what I also, start to talk to people about is, can you incorporate things to help that sweet tooth? And by that, I know that different fruits, and we know that different fruits, the ones that we like to recommend are berries, because of their health benefits, the antioxidant-rich foods, the polyphenols, but also their glycemic index. I also like to help people really enjoy sweet, something sweet as a treat. And if you can work with things like a piece of avocado, and I made a chocolate mousse with avocado, natural cacao powder. Someone on my team created the recipe, and I tested it, and I made some tweaks, and it was actually delicious. And super ripe banana, piece of avocado, super dark chocolate, healthy fat, the cacao, great for your brain. Banana, not so much of it, it wasn't a huge amount, but it offered that sweetness back. And when it was whipped, it was like a dark chocolate mousse. So if you can maybe do that, because you are getting some sugars from the fruit, but it's okay. It's a treat for you, and do it that way. I think that there's a sort of path you want to go to get off the sugar alcohols and the sugar itself. So that's one route.
Yeah, I love that. So the less, the better, because it does keep your brain thinking you want something sweet. So if you can do less, that's better.
It's super sweet, exactly.
Right.
It's your receptors get hypersensitive to that.
And I'm really glad to hear you say that erythritol, because that's what I've been recommending. I was hoping you'd say the science was still supporting that.
Right now it's still okay, but again, in moderation. I'm not saying you should be. Yeah.
There are some people I know. Some people seem to be more sensitive to it than others, but it's not like xylitol, which causes the gas, the bloating, the GI upset. It's very different.
It is. And right now it still seems to be okay to use in moderation. So I'd much rather someone do that than, even with diet soda. I mean, just check what's in it, because I can't tell you it's going to be okay for your brain if you just switch to that. So.
Yeah. And I'd love to get your feedback on this. People often ask me why stevia is better than other sweeteners if it's still processed. And my understanding is, and the way that what I've found when I looked into it, is stevia is extracted from a leaf. So it's an extraction process. It's not actually created by combining a bunch of chemicals. So
right. Exactly. I don't know much about how it's made, but I do know it's natural, and it's made from the plant. And in that way, in order to make it look like that powder, there's something that happens to it. But I don't think it's as bad right now for what we know for our brain, and that's how I would think about it. I think it's quite different from saying that, people don't realize that breakfast cereals are, yes, they might have a content of a whole grain, but they're extruded, right? There's a whole process they go through, and they're highly processed. I'm not even talking about the sugar. So even something with a lot of fiber in it, it's misleading because of the level of processing. So in this way, I think that stevia is not a bad choice.
Excellent. So let's see. In the time we have left, let me see how much time do we have left. I want to make sure that I optimize you.
And Tana, I should also just clarify something from the book as well. In certain chapters, we ask people to avoid stevia, but in those chapters, the studies have shown that they drive a particular condition. So it's also specific in that way.
Oh, that's so interesting. Oh, excellent. So how do you use food to lessen your anxiety? Because right now anxiety is through the roof.
Exactly. Exactly. There's some. So we've talked about the foods to avoid, and those hit some high points. But the things to touch on are things like adding turmeric and black pepper to your food. A quarter teaspoon with a pinch of black pepper is a good way to go. Fatty fish, salmon, and then plant-based sources of omega-3s are a good idea. Certain with anxiety, also eliminating or slowly cutting back on gluten has been shown to help anxiety. So there's another one right there. and foods with vitamin D. So those things seem to hit some high points in terms of helping anxiety. There's several more in the book, but starting there is a good, a good take home point, because turmeric, even if you don't cook with it, put that in a pinch of black pepper in a soup or a stew. If you do cook with it, it can go into a lot of different dishes. With vitamin D foods, you can include them. I prefer to get it, the food sources itself, and then omega-3s are pretty easy to get.
Oh, that's fantastic. So is there, what I'm kind of hearing, and maybe you can clarify, there really is a general, because it seems like these same foods are good for your general brain health, and some of these same foods are good for depression, right? So
exactly, there's definitely an overlap with some of the foods, and part of it is like the neurochemicals we spoke about. It hits, it targets certain things, and there are some overlap. But for example, saffron has some very positive trials with depression. We haven't necessarily seen that yet with anxiety, but if you want to get more specific on the foods for depression, there are other ones to go to as well.
Excellent. So in the book, This Is Your Brain on Food, you do such a great job of going over those lists and really guiding people in a very specific way. And I love it because you're one of our people. I feel like you're like a spirit animal.
Thank you. I love that. I feel the same way about you and Dr. Heyman. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always just so much fun to work with people who, just help us get that message out. So I have one question. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to know what inspired you to, you're a Harvard trained physician. What inspired you to become a chef? Was there something personal with your own health?
No, I've had some health issues, but in relation to going to culinary school, that really was following my passion. I was a big fan of one of my food heroes is Julia Child, because I don't know if I ever told you, Tana, I didn't know how to cook. I came from a very large Indian family, and everyone cooked, and I didn't need to. I could bake. My mom knew I loved science, and she taught me to bake. But when I first moved to Boston and was studying, we couldn't afford cable television, so she was on television. She would be my entertainment for the day. And I really grew to love cooking. And of course, it also came from a loving family and that sense of nurturance. And I wanted to take it further. And when I read about her life and read her cookbooks and understood she had done it later in life, sort of a second career, I thought, well, it's not too late. I've done residency. Why don't I, explore this and try it out? But I think that learning that and then putting it together with nutrition is how I arrived at where I am. And certainly nutritional psychiatry was helpful for health issues that I've had.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting that you chose that being a psychiatrist. It's just fascinating to me and you learn to use medicine literally as food, literally to be medicine. So I love to hear that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see, what else? I wanted to know, what do you think about fiber? So even with, I'm doing the modified sort of keto, I add a lot more greens, but I do add fiber. And I know that there's some people who think you should really keep carbs down no matter what when you're doing a keto, but fiber is really important. Tell us why and what you think about adding fiber to a keto diet.
Exactly. I think that people do differ on that because in part, like we spoke about, it depends on how their body responds. And it depends on how they want to count their carbs in terms of the diet. But I have to come at it from the gut microbiome again and hop on that, which I know people are going to be bored with. But, here's the thing. It's really one of those pillars. It's, the fiber from those. And maybe you could look at the vegetables that are not high in carb and incorporate those more often and see how you do with it. Because the fiber from those, you really can't get in anything else that you might be eating. I'm just not sure what your sources of fiber might be, and why not, get it from food if you can. Right. There's certain supplements people can take, but why not use it from food? So that's, to me, if you're taking care of your gut bacteria, you're doing your body good, and you're certainly doing your brain good. Because the more positive short-chain fatty acids that those little bugs create for you, the better your brain is going to be. So I would say if you're concerned about it, go for the lower carb ones, but don't give them up because the fiber is going to be important for you.
I like that. So Dr. Perlmutter is one of my mentors when I first started this journey. And because I do tend to eat a lot of high fat, high protein foods, I found that I did need a little bit of a bump. So in my smoothie in the morning, I would add a little bit of acacia fiber, and that's supposed to be a really good prebiotic. But I agree with you. You should try to get as much as you can from food. So how much would you recommend people get every day?
So I like to challenge people to kind of, so I sort of say to them, look, I want you to eat the rainbow of foods, right? Lots of fruits and vegetables, but, portion size is understood. And so say with your vegetables, how many different colors can you put in your salad? Yeah. Now, these individuals that may not be on a keto or just a keto diet. And that gives them, gamifies it. And B, it's sort of, it makes it fun for kids. It makes it fun for the family. It makes it beautiful and colorful. We eat with our eyes first. So I like to challenge them in that way, because what I find is if I say you have to get a certain number of grams, it's hard to break that down for people. So by saying to them, look, can you add as many colors of foods to your fresh foods or, veggies and to your day? And can you increase that during the week? It makes it a little bit easier, because what I find is on an average, they're eating about 5 or 6 different vegetables in a day just by asking them that. So I think that might be a slightly easier way to go.
Oh, I like that. So once again, I just want to show your book, because I actually have people commenting and asking what the name of the book is. So This Is Your Brain on Food is the name of the book, and it's Uma Naidoo. And Dr. Naidoo, how can they find you?
Thank you. So I have a website where you can reach us, and it's book.umanaidoomd.com. And that's probably the best way to reach us.
All right, I'm going to spell that out just because it's hard for people to try and figure it out. So it's book.uma, U-M-A, Naidoo, N-A-I-D-O-O, right? .com?
Yes. MD.com. MD.com.
MD.com, yeah, of course. Yeah. So that's great. And I just so appreciate your time and sharing this with our listeners and our followers. And if I can, I would like to consider you a mentor from this point on.
I'd be honored, Shanna. I love speaking to you and Daniel. So,
and I just love it.
Happy to collaborate.
Right? So we need to get the message out there.
Exactly.
Before we go, I just want to let people know, next week's live chat, I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Jennifer Love, who actually works for us at Amen Clinics, and she has a new book called When Crisis Strikes, the 5 steps to heal your brain, body, and life from chronic stress, which we're all going through right now. And this is going to be at 3 o'clock on Wednesdays. That's 3 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern. But I just really appreciate you guys coming and watching and honoring our guests and our doctors that we have on the show. And it's just been such a pleasure. So once again, before we end our show, This Is Your Brain on Food, and Dr. Uma Naidoo. And you've just been such a pleasure. So is there anything else you would like to talk about before we go? We've got a couple minutes.
I guess I would just say that every person's diet is, every person's food plan is different. And people should just try to embrace at least one healthy habit. Start there. Do one thing for yourself. If you're feeling like you're stressed and this pandemic is going on, do one thing for yourself, because if you can embrace one habit, it will stick. And I promise you that if you do one thing to help yourself, you will stick to it when you start to feel better.
I love it.
And I find that really works.
Yeah, we call that tiny habits. We like to
exactly.
So I'm kind of one of those jump the canyon kind of people. I've noticed that when I first started doing this, I thought everybody needed to jump the canyon. And then I realized, I'm not going to get very far because most people don't want to jump the canyon. Some people need to take little tiny steps, and that works. It's
exactly.
There.
Exactly. So whether it's whichever one it is,
Exactly.
Yeah. We all have to start somewhere.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate it. And so give us one quick tip that someone can do right now. If they get off of the show, what can they do right now?
I would say start to add turmeric and black pepper to your smoothie. Easily bought as a spice, will last long. 1/4 teaspoon a day, pinch black pepper to make it more bioactive. Targets a lot of different mental health symptoms that you don't have to cook with it if you're not used to it. It will still be fine in a smoothie or a soup.
I love that. And we actually, because of that, because I love curry, my husband doesn't. So but he really does like curcumin. And so we actually have a new supplement called Happy Saffron, and it's got some curcumin in it. We still want you cooking with it. But Happy Saffron is, it's actually one of our top supplements at the moment. It's doing really well. And saffron's been shown to be very effective for depression. So
it has been, exactly. And the point about saffron, I love the fact that you have a supplement, is that it's a very expensive spice.
Right.
And, not everyone cooks with it. It does go in risotto. It can go into risotto. It can go into biryani, an Indian rice dish, and it can go into paella. Yeah. So it's many things, but it's great. It's actually a lot easier for people because of the cost and not knowing necessarily how to use it to take a supplement in that instance. Yeah, we try to aim for food a lot of the time, but that's perfect.
Yeah, no, it's great. And it is, like, because I don't cook with it for the family, I put some in my tea. But nice. I appreciate it. We're going to run out of time here, and you've been so amazing, Dr. Naidoo. This is your brain on food. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tana. It was lovely to talk to you.
Have a wonderful day.
As always. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.